everyone, this is going to be another video looking at exam technique. Previously I've done a video looking at scenario questions. In this video I'm going to have a look at how you can write an essay question. So similar to in the previous video, I'm going to be referring to the new specification, so from 2020 onwards. So just bear in mind that if you are in year 13 at the moment and you're going off of the old specification, then you will still be expected to do your 10 marks for your AO1, 15 for your AO3 and your conclusion, but for the new specification it's 8 marks for your AO1, 12 marks for your AO3 and then your conclusion as well. So the same structure, same amount of information that you need to include for both, it's just that in the marking's a little bit different basically. So your AO1 for your essay question is pretty much exactly the same as it is in your scenario questions as well. So you're just explaining the law with cases. Again, just do the relevant law. So for example, if we're looking at a non-fatals essay question and it asks you to discuss the problems with section 47 and section 20, then those are the only two offences that you need to be explaining in your AO1 along with cases. You don't need to be going and explaining section 18 or anything like that because it hasn't asked for that within the question. If it's only asking for assault and battery, then you don't have to go in and explain ABH and GBH. You just need to explain the offences which are being asked of you. It might ask you to explain all of them or just ask you to evaluate the non-fatal offences in general, in which case you would need to discuss them all, but obviously you would not be expected to discuss them in as much detail as you would if you were to just have to focus on one or two, because the examiners are aware that you do have the same amount of time to write about the offences, whether you're writing about 2 of them or whether you're writing about all 5 of them. So you're just going to need to adjust the level of detail that you go into depending on how many you're asked to discuss. How much detail can you get within your AO1 within the 10 minutes that you should be taking to do your AO1. Again, you should be including cases within your AO1 as you would in a scenario question, and showing the examiner that you know the facts without being too lengthy about it. Try and keep it as concise as you possibly can. So the main difference between essay question and the scenario question is the second part. So in a scenario question you will be applying to a scenario that's given to you in the exam, but then for an essay question you will just be evaluating. So with a non-fatals question, for example, you would usually be asked to discuss the problems with it and ideas for reform. So this is where you do your 4 PDEH paragraphs. So you need to aim for 4 of these. So you would start off with your point. So your first point needs to link to the question. So if it's asked you to discuss the problems with section 47 of the Offence Against Person Act, one problem with section 47 actual bodily harm is, and then you could say that it doesn't follow the correspondence principle because the actus reus and the mens rea do not align how you think they would, for example. Then you need to move on to your development. So explain what you mean by this. Why is it a problem? So if we're following that same example, this is a problem because the law should only punish people for things that they actually intended to do, not things that just got out of hand. For example, extend on it. Say what are the implications of this? It can lead to injustice, it can be seen as unfair. How could that potentially be reformed? So if you are really struggling, just put in some of your own ideas for reform, but most of the ideas for reform that students tend to come up with in class have already been suggested by the Law Commission and the 1998 draft bill. So if you really want to push yourself into excellent when you're extending, try and reference those sources in your extension to show the examiner, look, I've read the Law Commission report, or look, I've read the 1998 draft bill, even though you haven't read all 300 pages of it. It looks like you have. So then once you've got your PDE, if you want to push yourself even further, make sure you put in a H on the end as well, so a however point. So this is where you want to try and twist what you've just said to make it an advantage. So for example, if we're saying that section 47 is problematic because it doesn't follow the correspondence principle, it's unfair that you're being charged with something that you didn't necessarily foresee, you only intended the original assault or battery, it's got a little bit out of hand. This is also a good thing because it discourages reckless behaviour and it encourages people to think about what they're doing before they actually do it. So it acts as a deterrent, for example. If you are struggling with doing the however points, because it is probably the hardest part, you've just gone through and said why something is so bad, and then to twist it and say however this can actually be good because, can be quite difficult. So if you are struggling with that, don't sit there in the exam and don't sit there for 10 minutes trying to think of a however point. Just move on, leave some space at the bottom of that paragraph, leave it at a PDE paragraph, move on to your next PDE paragraph, and then at the end, when you've got time, go in and add your H's at the end, because that is probably the most difficult part. So if you are struggling with that, don't waste time sat there trying to think of the answers. They will come to you as you're writing the rest of your PDE paragraphs. So if you are struggling with the H, stick with PD to begin with, and then go and add in H's at the end. Maybe leave some space at the end of each PD paragraph. And then key thing is that you really need a conclusion with an essay question. So on the paper you will notice that the question has a little asterisk next to it, and that means that you definitely need a conclusion. So if you don't conclude, you're going to be capped at level 1 or 2, no matter how good your answer is. So you could have written the most amazing 4 PD hit paragraphs, and if you don't include conclusion, that's it. So you really need to make sure that you're remembering to put a conclusion in. I know that, you know, when you study English and things like that, you're taught that it's not sophisticated to say to conclude, or you know, but we don't care about that in law. So make it really obvious to the examiner that you're concluding. Say to conclude, or overall, but I would go with to conclude because then it's like really in your face, they cannot cap you at all. And then with a conclusion, you want to weigh up both sides of the argument and then reach your own opinion at the end. So to conclude, the section 47 of the Offence Against a Person Act needs reform because, and then just summarise the points that you've already given. Don't bring in any new information here. Just look at the paragraphs you've already done, say because it doesn't follow the correspondence principle, the sentencing is the same as GBH, so it's unfair. However, it might not need reform because harsh sentences discourage risk taking, for example. So both sides of the argument, and then overall I think it does need to be reformed, or overall I think it doesn't need to be reformed. So easiest way to write a conclusion, make sure you're starting off to conclude, this is my conclusion. On one hand this, on the other hand this, overall I think, and then reach your decision. So I hope this video was helpful. I'm going to put a slide up at the end, again with the 3 sections. So jury, for those of you who feel like you need a little bit more help and guidance with essay writing. Barristers, for those of you who feel like you're on track, you just want to maintain your knowledge. And judges, for those of you who feel like you are flying ahead, you've got your essay writing down, you just want to push yourself a little bit further. So have a look at those, see which level you think applies to you the best, and then have a go at the task within it. So happy revising!